Culture audience. Thank you so much for waiting so long for a new podcast, and I'm so excited to begin season 2 of Engage Culture. And oh boy, there's a lot to go into. Got a lot of exciting topics we're going to be looking into, praying about, and just giving our insight in terms of what we believe the Spirit of the Lord is saying, based on the Word of God, based on what we're seeing happening around us. Whether it is locally or internationally, we're just going to keep speaking and just declaring what the Lord is saying and just looking at it from a biblical perspective. Today I want to open with something that is happening right now. It's still something that is live, which is an armed conflict that is occurring in Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine. And I want to open by indicating to you that I think the main thing that this conflict is revealing to us is how polarized we are as the world. And this is because the world is in a very interesting place. We don't trust the media. At the same time, we don't trust government institutions as much as we used to in the past. I think the trust of the media and the trust of government is at an all-time low. And more than ever, what's been happening in this past decade is we've been seeing the world getting pushed into a space where individuals, I think it's now the social, I think it's one of the changes the social media generation. It has put every human being now at a place where we are forced, every one of us get forced to have an immediate opinion on something without any form of research and without any form of study. We are put in positions now where, because of Twitter and Facebook and people tweeting and posting, that there's always this expectation that everyone must have an immediate perfect opinion on what's happening around us, given the limited information we have. And it's easy to get labeled something because of our limited opinion based on limited information. And right now we're seeing just a trend where we are being forced into binary groups. There's a binary thinking. There isn't room for non-binary thinking, that you must either be someone who is pro-black or pro-white. You must be left politically or right politically. You must be capitalist or socialist. You must be Republican or Democrat. You must be LGBT ally or you're homophobe. You must be pro-life or you're a baby killer. You must be pro-vax or you're anti-vax. You must be environmentalist or you're climate denier. You must be Catholic or Protestant. You must be Shia or Sunni. And there seems to be a concerted effort by the demonic world to keep us as humanity divided and fighting amongst each other every day. And if you look at this past decade, I would say there have been three major events in the earth which revealed to all of us our biases and our hypocrisies. We see that every one of us have certain biases, and every one of us, unfortunately, because of those biases, we're all hypocritical in one shape or another on different issues all the time. Obviously, one of the major events was the election of the polarizing figure, Donald Trump. It revealed our biases, and it also revealed the hypocritical nature of every one of us. Another thing which revealed our biases was COVID. COVID revealed our biases and our hypocrisies. Every one of us were exposed. And now it's this unfortunate conflict in Ukraine. And all of us in the world have to understand that we all have certain biases. And all of us, because of those biases, were all hypocritical. And there's this tendency, because of social media, a desire to always project and to present yourself as someone virtuous. Some people call it virtual signaling, where people always want to look like they are a good guy because they are dear to whatever is the mainstream thought, which makes everybody feel good about themselves. And I think right now, before I even get into some of my thoughts around this conflict, there are just two scriptures which I believe need to guide all of us in these times. The first one is Romans 3:23, which says, "For everyone has sinned. We all fall short of God's glorious standard." And we have to understand that even when we are approaching those three events, the election of that president, COVID, and now Ukraine, and various other things all around us, we have to approach it knowing that every one of us are sinners, and we are looking at it with broken mechanics. We're not perfect. So even in our assessment, there is also room for all of us to be wrong. And in John 8, verse 7, Jesus said something which I love as well. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." And we need to always be very humble when we're approaching issues in the earth. We need to always have a certain level of humility, because we are all flawed in our thinking and we're all flawed in our assessment. So before I start, I want to open by indicating that any war of invasion that occurs, our standard procedure when a nation is invaded must always to extend compassion to the citizens who are invaded, no matter what race they are, whether they're white, whether they are Arabic, whether they are African, whether they are South American. I think our initial response is we should always extend prayer and compassion to invaded people, no matter where they are on the earth. Right, let's get into this. So the first thing I want to talk about this conflict is I think we need to be careful to resist buying into any propaganda. And this is very important, because there is propaganda that is from the West, from Western media and Western governments, and there's also propaganda from the East, from the Eastern governments. So they are in this conflict. There's a Western view of what's going on, and there's also a Eastern narrative. There's two different narratives here. And unfortunately, what's been happening is recently we've seen that even here in South Africa, they've cancelled the Russian state television. Now, I don't support that idea of totally let's shut them out. I want to know, whether I agree with them or not. I want to know what's their logic, what's their rationale, why are they doing this? The West obviously saying that Putin is just this mad psychopath barbarian, but even though that's their narrative, I want to hear from the horse's mouth. I want to hear what are his reasons for this, because I think it's very important that we must still be able to hear both sides of any argument, whether it's a pro-life argument versus a pro-choice argument. I want to hear both sides. I don't want to silence the pro-choice person. I don't want to silence the pro-life person. I want to hear both sides of the argument, whether it's capitalism versus socialism. I want to hear what are the free market guys saying, what's their rationale behind capitalism. I also want to hear the socialists. I don't want just to label them as psychopaths who want to take over. I want to hear what they have to say. And I think that's one of the most dangerous things we have in the world today, is there's just so much censoring, there's so much cancelling, and unfortunately, the hard reality we have to understand today is that most media is controlled by the West. Most media is controlled also in the West. It's dominated by the left side of politics. And even to make matters worse, all the bigger social media companies which are based in America are all Western, and at the same time they're all leftist. So anything that is from the East, anything that is pro-East or pro-African or pro-Arabian, pro-Muslim, pro-right, pro-whatever, we're not going to hear much of it, because the West and the left are dictating our information. But I want a society where for me personally, I think it's insulting people's intelligence to say that someone can't tell the difference between what's a good idea and what's a bad idea or whatever, but allow us the opportunity to hear. So right now, we can only hear one side of the argument. And I think it's very important that we don't buy into any propaganda, but we make sure that we listen very carefully to both sides before rushing to this black and white thinking. This is the bad guy. This is the good guy. This is, I'm pro NATO, I'm pro Russia, I'm pro Ukraine, I'm pro whatever. I think it's very important that even if I am pro Ukraine, I still want to hear what the opposition is saying. Even if I'm pro Russian, I also want to hear what are the people of Ukraine saying, what are the people in NATO saying, what are the people. I also want to hear both sides. So I think we're in a dangerous place where both sides of the argument are censoring each other. The guys on the Russian side are censoring any media coming from the West, and the West, which is meant to be the beacon of liberty, freedom of speech, we're actually the first ones to cancel what Russia was saying. So I find that very concerning. Number two, um, one of the things I think that's also very important in our process of praying about this conflict, in our process of drawing conclusions and opinions, I think if you're very interested in this matter, there's some people in Africa who honestly don't care, who are also just dealing with our day-to-day African problems. And there's some people around us who actually don't care about what's going on there. But if you're someone who cares about what's happening there, I think it's very important. If you're someone who cares and if you're someone who's also very opinionated on it, I think it's very important to take some time to also study the history of that region, the history of Russia, Ukraine, what it was like during the time of the Tsars, or what happened when the Bolshevik Revolution happened in 1917. Why is there such contention around this region, and also what are the demographics of the people of Ukraine? Is the country 100% Ukrainian? Are there also Russians who stay there? And how many people identify as Russian as compared? I think this is very good. Just before just drawing extreme opinions and drawing extreme conclusions, I think it's also good just to have just a macro understanding of the history. What happened to Ukraine after the fall of the Soviet Union? What happened in 1990? What was the 1994 resolution which made the people of Ukraine give up their nuclear weapons? What was their agreement with NATO and Russia at that time? What happened? I think it's very important to understand all these deep historic things. What happened just recently in 2014? There was a coup. There was a coup which occurred in Ukraine, and that's one of that's one of the triggers of this particular conflict. What happened this thing didn't just happen, and I think sometimes in Western media, the way it's being presented to us, it felt as if Putin just woke up one day. He's this psychopath. He woke up one day and decided, let's go and take over this country. And we don't understand that there's a lot of complex historical layers to all of this. What happened in 2014 with the coup? What happened with the Crimea region? What happened after that? And what's all this? What's the deal with NATO wanting to expand to Ukraine? Why does Russia not want NATO? What is NATO? They claim to be a defensive organization. Is that true? What is their track record? What has happened to all the places that NATO has intervened militarily? Why? I think this thing is complicated. It's complicated, and if you're someone with an interest for it, just broaden your reading. And I love listening to. For me personally, I like listening to both sides of the argument. I like listening to the guys who are pro-NATO, what they have to say. And I also like listening to the guys who are against NATO and the guys who are pro-Russia. I like to hear what they have to say, because I don't want just to get blinded by one side of the argument. Number three, another thing we need to think about is who benefits from this war. Now, there are definitely people who are going to benefit from war. There's people who benefit financially significantly when wars occur. And obviously, two of the major beneficiaries we can immediately single out are people in the world of media. Media benefits because now there's a war to cover. Media always has good numbers when there's a war. Another major beneficiary are what people call the military-industrial complex. People who sell weapons, because if you're in the business, because right now you can see there's already a shift again. People are buying arms. I mean, Europe is arming itself. Germany, for the first time in its history, is working on rebuilding its military. So that's going to be a lot of money for people in the arms business. And I think that's one of being in the business of arms and selling weapons. It's a very tricky business, and you benefit through the suffering of others. It's such a very difficult business to justify and to get into. At the same time, people do need weapons to defend themselves from situations like this. So definitely people in the media are going to benefit. And then there's people behind the scenes who we don't know, political actors, people in corridors of power and influence who are going to gain more influence, more power, more resources. So while the people of Ukraine are crying, some people in certain offices and in certain rooms are celebrating, because things are going to work out for them. Number four, who suffers from this war? The people of Ukraine. The people of Ukraine are already suffering. You're seeing this huge refugee outpouring. People are dying, people are being hurt. So, on the first micro level, the people of Ukraine directly suffer. And also, number two, other people who suffer, the people of Russia also suffer. Because I think one of the things we have to make a distinction from is that there are Russians in Russia who want no parts of this war. There's some people in Russia who just want to live a normal life, like me and you. I was in Russia. I mean, was this 2 years ago? I was in Russia 2 or 3 years ago. Was it 2020 or no? It was 2019. This is before I was in Russia in Moscow, and I spent like a week there. And one of the things I noticed is I was at this thing that I had the bias and stereotypes of what Russians are like, but being there, spending time in that environment, I also saw that a lot of people there are just like people everywhere else. I'm not talking about the government. I never interacted with anybody in the government, but just as a tourist, people in restaurants, people were in Starbucks, people, I mean, KFC there was packed like it was no man's business. From what I saw, they're just normal European people and just normal people generally. And the people of Russia are also going to suffer heavily from this. And then thirdly, all of us, the whole world, we're all going to suffer because on some way or another, we're already seeing it with gas prices, we're seeing it with inflation, we're seeing it with various things. We are all going to suffer because of this conflict. That's how serious this thing is. Every one of us, even the person who doesn't care, who's like, I don't care about Ukraine, I don't care, it's their own story. Unfortunately, indirectly, you're still going to be touched, and you're still going to suffer because of this conflict. So we need to pray. And then number 5, and this one connects to number 4, who's going to suffer. One of the major factors which makes this conflict particularly dangerous and something we need to pray about is the nuclear factor. There's a nuclear factor that is involved, and Russia is a nuclear power. So they have the power. If this thing goes south, and okay, let's just say the worst opinion of Putin is correct. Let's say they're 100% on the money that Putin has gone mad and he's planning to restore the USSR and build a huge Russian empire. If things go south and this is a psychopath, he's got the power to destroy the world right now. The kind of nuclear weapons he has, him individually, if he starts a nuclear conflict, all of us, tichaenda kudenga, we shall all go to heaven and meet Jesus Christ. So this thing is very serious, and I see a lot of people trying to push the US, NATO into Ukraine. They're calling for no-fly zones. They're calling for, come on, we got to send troops. We don't want a nuclear war. We do not want to start a nuclear war under any circumstances. America, as powerful as it is, this thing will end up bad. Not only and that's the danger of nuclear weapons, in that they have the power to make us extinct immediately. You can have things like, I've been looking at scenarios, nuclear scenarios, what would happen. One of the scenarios is if a nuclear war erupts in the north, even us in the south, we're going to experience what is known as a 100-year winter. The sun is going to be blocked out. There's many scenarios but ultimately we're all going to die very painful deaths. So the nuclear factor is just something we mustn't play with. So we have to push for restraint, push for peace, push for wisdom. That, these things can escalate. There can be a rogue actor who can create a false flag and make it seem like America has bombed Russia. There's so many things which can happen here, and we have to be very prayerful. Particularly the nuclear factor now involves all of us. If this was a time when there were no nuclear weapons, would say, let them finish each other there. Let them fight. We're praying for them, but hey, let them deal with each other there. Whoever comes up on top is the one we will, whatever. But now we're living in a time because of the nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, we are now all part of this war, whether we like it or not. We are now all part of this war. So we have to monitor it and pray for wisdom and restraint, and also pray that one of my own personal gripes is, okay, there's all these sanctions being thrown left, right, and center, but I think that there still has to be diplomacy and an off-ramp, because even for Putin himself, being in Ukraine, he can't be in this conflict for long and forever. It's just not going to make sense financially and just logistically. But I think that the West also needs to provide avenues, ways out. How do we stop this? How do we end this? It can't just be we're taking away Visa, we're taking away Netflix, we're taking away McDonald's, we're taking away, and we're doing all this stuff. But they also have to be off ramps to get everyone out of this ugly situation. Number six, another thing we need to talk about is the ugly racist treatment of Africans who've been trying to leave Ukraine by, first of all, by the people of Ukraine. There have been many videos which have surfaced concerning African students trying to get on trains and being stifled by Ukrainian police, Ukrainian army, and there seems to be a preference for white Ukrainians to evacuate. And initially they'd said women and children, but we've had black women, black African women, and also Indians and various other people of color who have been turned away and stifled in their exit. So that's by the people of Ukraine, the same people you want Africans to pray for, the same people you want us as Africans to put flags and all these things. And at the same time, there's this blatant racism happening. It's like a slap in our faces. And this is why I'm saying very carefully, when these conflicts are happening, don't just also be quick to jump in. Hey, pray for Ukraine. And then you see the people of Ukraine treating your black brothers like that. You also must understand that even in Eastern Europe, we've seen Western racism, but there's also another brand of racism that's in the Eastern Bloc of Europe. It's another level as well. So I was very disappointed and very touched when I saw that. I didn't like that at all. It didn't sit well with me. And I'm not going to make any excuse about it and just sanitize it because there's now an invasion. That was wrong, Ukraine. What Ukraine did there was wrong. There's no excuse for it. And then at the same time, when some of our African brothers get to the borders, like particularly Poland, we're hearing reports that Poland do not want any black Africans. They don't want any black Africans who are fleeing a conflict to come into their country. So again, for us as Africans, you're calling us to now have compassion about this thing, but then at the same time we're being treated like rubbish. That's not fair. That's not right. And I 100% condemn it. I 100% speak against it. And I'm not going to try and sanitize it and start saying, oh, no, it's okay, because the bigger picture is, no, you can't treat our people like that and expect us to now just stand up one time. We'll also try and listen. Why are the Russians coming here? Because look at how our people are being treated here as well. So our people, we care about our people. We also care about the interests of our people who are not being given safe passage out of a conflict which they haven't started. Most of them are just students trying to study, trying to become doctors, trying to advance their lives, and they're being kept in harm's way in a conflict they've got no business being a part of. And then that feeds into number 7. We've seen a lot of also racial news coverage, and we have to be honest and very clear about this. We've been seeing people saying that, oh, this Ukraine conflict, we must have so much compassion for it because we're seeing people with blonde hair and blue eyes crying, dying and being attacked. We're seeing people who have our values being attacked. It's not some people in the Middle East or in the third world in Africa who Trevor Noah covered it very, very well in terms of just the racial bias in the news coverage and just the selective outrage and the selective compassion. I shudder to think if this was a battle between Zimbabwe and South Africa or between Nigeria and Ghana, I don't know if we would get the same kind of media response and outrage and compassion, So this is something in terms of the racial news coverage, that's something we must call out and not also be dumb and not also be people who are blinded to just the reality of it, that this is not right. We must call it out and speak against it. And then another thing we must remember as well, number 8, is Europe, like any other continent, has been at war for centuries. The earliest recordings of a war in Europe predate 500 BC in Talheim, Germany. And then there have been wars with the Romans, the Greeks, If we look just at the past 200 years, particularly in Eastern Europe, there has been conflict in so many places, like Georgia, Kosovo. There have been so many conflicts happening in Europe. So war is something that has been historically associated with humanity, and even in just the continent of Europe, Europe has been at war for centuries. Number 9. The next question we need to think about is, what is the major driver of this conflict? The Western media tell their position on this war is that Russia has imperial aspirations, that Putin has gone crazy and now wants to restore the USSR. And the Russian side of the argument is this conflict is because of NATO expansion. Their argument is that from the time of 1990 and when the USSR collapsed, that there was a promise that NATO would not expand to the east, would not expand closer to Russia. And on 2 occasions, in 1998, there was an expansion. And then there was another expansion in 2004, which brought NATO even closer. And Ukraine now seems to have been their red line. They're not going to allow this to happen. We're not going to allow, the same way America didn't allow Russia to have missiles in Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 60s with JFK. They don't want American weapons and Western weapons near their border. They don't want to be encircled. So those are the two conflicting positions, and time will reveal who's telling the truth. Is Russia only going to stop at Ukraine because the West argues that it's going to take Ukraine, then it's going to go into Poland, it's going to do a Hitler. He's just going to start trying to take more and more, grabbing more and more territory. Time will prove if that's true or not. Or is it just NATO expansion? And time will prove, let's just say NATO and Ukraine and Russia agree that, okay, NATO shall remain neutral. Will that be the last time we hear of Russia doing things like this? So only time will reveal who's telling the truth. But don't take a side. Okay, you can take a side. You're free to do what you want. But at the same time, be open. Be open to changing your mind when new information and new events come to pass. And then number 10, one of my personal concerns is there seems to be a sweeping attack on all Russians. It literally, I think the targeted sanctions at the beginning were making sense when they were targeting the president, when they were targeting the oligarchs, and they were targeting people in the regime. But I think the sanctions are now getting wider in scope and are literally oppressive to all Russians. And I just strongly believe that I don't think all Russians are involved in this thing. And there seems to be an all-out attack on all Russians and everything Russian. We're seeing even Russian cats being banned. We're seeing people changing names of certain things, and everything Russian is being attacked. And I'm seeing that this treatment is very similar to remember after 9/11 there was a time there was heavy Islamophobia where everyone was just against everything Islamic, everything Arabic. But I'm glad that the world managed to dial that back some, and were able to distinguish that the terrorists who attacked America were not a representation of everyone. It didn't mean that everyone who's Muslim is now a terrorist. And even with the coronavirus, there was a time there was also an anti-China, anti-Chinese response, and that's from the fallen nature of man again. But I think we managed to deal with it where we didn't create an anti-China, anti-Chinese sentiment. So I think even with the Russians, they're coming into that, and we have to be careful as well not to label every Russian as the second coming of Lucifer. Finally, what I want to close with today is we have to make sure that as believers that we understand what the Word of God says about war. I might do another podcast just on war and conflict and things like that and what the Bible says. But Jesus told us, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Child of God, don't panic. Don't panic. Wars are a fact and a reality of life. Wars are a fact and a reality of the human existence. If you look at your birthday, you look at the time you were born, that same year you were born, somewhere in the world there was a conflict. And every year that you've lived on this earth, if you even do a Google, what conflicts were happening in the 80s, in the 90s, every year there's been some type of conflict happening somewhere in the world consistently. Even right now, Ukraine is not the only armed conflict happening right now. There's stuff happening in Syria. There's conflict happening in Yemen. There's on and off conflict happening in Israel. In Africa, there's conflict. Cameroon, there's Congo. There's so many different places. Mozambique. There's so many conflicts happening around us. But particularly us in Africa, they're not going to cover us. Forget it. But you must know that that's a reality of life. It's a fact of life, and they're going to happen. And no matter how hard you pray, there'll never be peace on earth until Jesus comes. But he encourages us in this text that we must not be alarmed. Such things will happen, but the end is still to come. He controls time, and he will decide when this whole construct of the physical realm is going to cease and his kingdom is going to come. But until then, we pray and we keep pressing forward with hope. Our prayers go to the people of Ukraine. Our prayers go for a peaceful resolution. We pray, Father, that give our leaders in Russia, our leaders in NATO, our leaders in Ukraine, give them wisdom to end this conflict, to de-escalate it, and let there be peace. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.